Welcome back. From hoisting its national flag in a moment to deploying weapons of war in a wave of brutality, the situation escalated in South Sudan till it became one of the worst humanitarian crises behind Syria and Afghanistan. Well, after 5 years of prolonged hostilities and previous peace agreements ending in deadlocks, a new agreement saw the withdrawal of troops, granting of amnesty to offenders, and a power-sharing deal. Joining me in the studio on Africa Today, I have Achike Chude, a political analyst in Nigeria, and on Skype I have Kuir, a South Sudan political analyst based in Canada. Good to have you gentlemen on the program.
Thank you very much.
Let me begin with you now, Achike Chude. This Sunday's deal we saw appears to be the latest power-sharing agreement between both rival leaders. Now, what's the guarantee that this will be different from what the country has had in 2014, 2015? What's the difference that this ceasefire would last?
I think there are many differences. I mean, clearly, first of all, the people involved are saying that the antagonist and the protagonist are saying that this one itself is very different because the very first agreement was forced upon them. You know, so that presupposes that this particular agreement is something that they willingly, you know, went into, and they want to put their political will behind it. And again, there has been a lot of discussions, discussions going into this particular peace deal. So it's not just something that happened overnight. For instance, some months back, I think it is Ahmed Abiy, the Ethiopian president, who is on the rise in the continent in terms of public perception of him having, tried to also bring peace between Ethiopia and Eritrea. He invited the major forces, to a dinner, or it was a private dinner in Ethiopia. That is Salva Kiir and Riek Machar, and also spoke with them. And then after that, we've had other centers of discussions. Sudan is playing a key role. Uganda is also involved, and then I think they'll be meeting somewhere again in Ethiopia. So you have a lot of other groups that are interested in ensuring that this peace deal holds this time around. The intergovernmental agency, IGAD, is also very, heavily involved in the process. But I think what is critical, really, is the involvement of two major influential people, in this peace process, and that is Sudan and Uganda. All this while, Sudan has been supporting the rebel movements, some of the, opposing groups in opposition to the government of Salva Kiir. So he has brought his weight behind this peace agreement, and definitely because he has been playing a key role in terms of resourcing some of these organizations and all of that, giving them a safe haven, giving them allowing them use Sudan as a base and all of that. So the fact that he is also involved in this process, he has a way of bringing them to the table and talking some sense into them. And then Uganda too has, on the other side, been on the side of the government, propping up the government and all of that, also giving some help to the government. So when you now have these two antagonistic forces coming together to say, look, we need to make this thing work. And then you have these other groups too, especially the government of Salva Kiir and then Riek Machar, also saying, look, we want this thing to work. Then there is a greater propensity, a greater possibility that if they are able to put their mind into it, that we could see a completely different peace arrangement. They said, look, they want a permanent peace arrangement. And of course they've talked about the deployment of soldiers and the African Union, the IGAD countries within that region and all of that. So all of these people are also involved in ensuring that hopefully this time around they're going to have a much more permanent peace deal. So there's every possibility that it's going to work. I mean, not everything has not been done yet because it's a process. This is just the beginning of something good.
Right. From what Achike just pointed out, Garang, he sounds optimistic that perhaps this might be the last of the ceasefire we'll see in South Sudan. But observers have said that this the latest peace-sharing agreement, has a resemblance or similarity in the accord that was signed in 2015, which later saw a collapse in 2016. Do you think perhaps there might be a breakdown along the line?
I will have to disagree because we can say that there's a difference in terms of brokerage, and because who is mediating? Bashir is now taking, the center stage, and also Museveni. We can say there's a difference in terms of who is mediating. But in terms of the substance of the agreement, nothing is changing. So while I might welcome the agreement that it sort of gives people hope, I don't think that there's something different that is going to come from it. And the main reason why I think that's the case is we have reports from Khartoum, as much as the president and also the former vice president are saying that this wasn't forced. We have reports from Khartoum from high-level people who are saying this is actually being forced on them. They don't want to say it, but it's almost the same as what happened in Addis, the failure of the 2015 agreement. So in terms of it not being forced, there are reports that it's actually being forced. The other thing that we also need to remember that, as he said, it's a process. We don't have the implementation matrix. It's not being agreed upon. We have a problem with inclusivity. There are so many parties that are being included in the process. So, and also, it's all about power sharing. There's nothing about the people. Amnesty is now calling that the president called for the amnesty for the vice president and the other people involved. The amnesty is saying, you know what, people who have committed atrocities should not be let go that way. So this is not about the people of South Sudan. So I don't see any much difference. The other problem, when the president went back to Juba, the way he talked about not wanting to work with vice president and that he just had to compromise, but he doesn't want to work with him. That reminds us of the past. The other thing is he called for amnesty. When you sign an agreement with a group of people, you work together with them. You don't decide things on your own. So that's why I'm not so much optimistic.
Right, let's quickly go on a very quick break. You're watching Africa Today, and we've been looking at political developments in South Sudan in the wake of a new peace agreement after 5 years of civil war.
Our land has been claimed. Our homes have been taken away. The waters have invaded man's habitat, thereby crippling commercial activities. Our seas and waterways have broken their bounds, sweeping away lives and property. How long do we suffer from this self-imposed environmental hazard? Drainage systems are not our waste bins. Stop dredging. Stop distorting the balance of our oceans. Stop building on water channels. Let's protect this nation. Let's sustain Mother Nature. Together, we can recreate a planet in harmony. This message is brought to you by TVC News.
Welcome back. Now, the latest agreement which reinstates Mr. Macha in government is the second attempt to end the conflicts that erupted in 2013 and the third arrangement that will see the two men share power since the state's inception in 2011. Well, the civil war that broke out in 2013 has claimed at least 50,000 lives and displaced 4 million people. Now, Achike, you sounded so optimistic that perhaps this could be the final, power sharing agreement between these two rival leaders. No. Let me land here because, in this mediation we have Sudan in this, and Sudan has been accused of, sponsoring the rebel group. Now, how neutral do you think Sudan will be in this case? Because there's some level of skepticism right now on what Sudan might bring to the table in terms of perhaps allowing this peace to fully take place.
A lot of people do not know that Sudan has some serious economic issues. That's one. And then also they have their own political and social issues and all of that. So sometimes, when you are facing all of this at home, you want to do some other things that would divert attention from some of the issues that you face at home. And again, of course, you know that Bashir has been in the eye of the storm for a very long time. He still has an indictment at the international level, accusation against him by the International Criminal Court and all of that. And so he wants to be seen as a peacemaker in that region, as somebody that is different, very different from what he's been, painted as. And then again, the present situation with oil production, I think, is also not in his favor. when at the inception of independence, South Sudan was producing about 350,000 barrels of crude oil a day. It has fallen to about 120,000 barrels as a result of the crisis that's going on. Part of the agreement also is that Sudan would also help to prop up the refinery, be involved in making sure that the refinery is taken, to the level, immediately post-independence, that it was operating at, and so on. So that is something, also there for Sudan. And like I said, they also want to be seen as playing a much more useful role within that particular region. And so since it is already a well-known fact that Sudan has been supporting some other groups, and that this time around they are openly supporting the peace process, I want to believe that that will be enough incentive to want to push them to do much more to ensure that this peace deal does not unravel, because in this case it is not in anybody's interest. Uganda, Museveni on the other side too has also been doing something. Look, ultimately at the end of the day, it's important for countries as much as possible to ensure that they live at peace with one another, and that even internally within some of these countries that they don't resort to crisis that will have definite spillover effects, where you begin to grapple with the issue of refugees and all of that, because these are the natural consequences of civil disorder, wars, conflicts, and all of that. So it's going to bother a lot of these other countries if it gets to that level. So why not look for ways to sort out some of the critical issues that make it impossible for South Sudan to achieve internal cohesion and stability. And I think that they are all working towards it. But I think that, again, what might be troublesome might be the processes, how they handle some of the crises that would arise, some of the disagreements that would arise as they implement, because they have a 2-year transitional program. 3
actually.
Okay, about 3 years, within which
elections to be held.
Yes, they would also plan towards an election and all of that. Now that itself is capable of generating crisis somewhere along the line. So it's not something you just put in place and then the other regional powers or other countries around them will just keep off. They have to be involved in every stage of the process itself, the peace process and so on, so that it does not unravel. And it's, like I said, it's in the interest of the principal people, because again, there is also the threat of sanctions. And I think the international community is actually very tired, because ultimately at the end of the day, you need to be able to hold somebody responsible for the breakdown, in the peace process. And I think it's not just about carrot, it's also about the stick. That if you do not make this thing work, we're tired of this persistent problem in South Sudan. We are going to wield the big stick. We are going to impose sanctions, and then perhaps other punitive measures to make sure that, yes,
that the peace holds. Now, Kuir, in as much as it is a good development in South Sudan, and rival leaders seem to agree to the deal, what about their fighters now of both sides? Do you think perhaps they will also follow in line with this agreement? How would the fighters of these rival leaders be kept in check?
That is actually one of the hardest things to do, because even when they signed the cessation of hostilities, we had reports of fighting. And what is funny is both sides say that it is the other side that's causing the problem. The president is saying, when he came back from Khartoum, he said that he had reports of the opposition attacking his forces, and then opposition saying, no, it's not us. So the two leaders don't have much control over the forces, especially the opposition, because it's a loose collection of forces that are not necessarily, committed to Machar, because they have grievances of their people being killed in 2013. That's why they joined the opposition. So that is going to be really tricky in terms of fighting. But that is not the main problem when it comes to respecting the agreement. The main problem is the relationship between the two leaders. We saw during the agreement the president refused to actually shake Machar's hand. So that gives people some sort of people were cringing. Why would we accept that these two leaders would work together when they cannot even pretend to shake hands? So that was one of the issues. When the president came back, he went to his headquarters, military headquarters, in military gear, and talked to the forces. Even if what he was saying was positive, it sent a wrong message to the people. So, and also, one of the things that is really difficult for me to understand, he started promoting many people to military ranks, many people within a period of a week. It makes people wonder what is going on. If you're talking about peace, why are you promoting people as if you're preparing for war and getting into military gear? So this is why it's hard for us to accept. But at the end of the day, and I would agree with your guest that Bashir has a stake in it. Yeah, he can do something so that he can be seen as a peace broker. It's not about him being a peacemaker because Sudan has problems. He's not going to give South Sudanese something he's not giving Sudanese. There's a war in Darfur, there's war in southern Blue Nile, there's war in Nuba Mountains. If he cannot give Sudanese peace, why would we accept that he's going to give peace to South Sudanese? This is mostly economic and it's also political. But as I come to the forces, it's difficult to predict because the two leaders don't actually control the forces. Even the SPLA, that is the government force, is not professionalized in a way where the president says, do this, and they do it. There's still a collection of militias that are allied to the president because of incentives, not because they actually believe in what they do.
Now, let's look at this issue, the humanitarian issue now, Garang. Humanitarian aid in South Sudan is really dire right now, as we speak, because the people are falling short of access to aid. Now, if this peace deal falls again, how difficult will it get this time?
It's going to be really impossible for people to actually live because the humanitarian workers on the ground, as much as they deal with the impassable roads during rainy season, the roads are difficult, and then the bandits, they're being actually terrorized by the forces. So now, if this peace is coming, it at least gives people some hope that peace is coming, and people who would want to fight, they sit back and say, okay, maybe we'll give it a chance. So the talk of peace gives people some, pause for thought. But if this fails, it becomes really chaos because the control is not there. The opposition do the same thing. They kidnap people. They stop humanitarians because they feel they are allied to the government. The government forces do the same thing. They accuse the humanitarian workers as working for the opposition. So they are stuck in the middle. But if this peace falls, then it exacerbates the problem. People will start again to continue to flee to neighboring countries, whether Ethiopia, Uganda, or even Sudan. But if this peace holds, then at least people will say, okay, maybe we shouldn't do this, because if peace comes, we'll be held accountable. But the failure of peace, as much as I don't believe it's going to work in the long run, I still think the psychological effect of peace is actually important to note.
All right. Now, Achike, we need to have this thing brought to a head because the people in this case really matter. And not only do we have humanitarian aid or crisis as we speak in South Sudan, there are lots of displaced people. Some have gone to neighboring countries, about 2 million to neighboring countries right now. Now there is some level of optimism, that South Sudan might be getting back on its feet. Do you think perhaps that these 2 million people that have left South Sudan are ready to come back?
You need a lot of things, on ground to get them to come back. You need a lot of infrastructure. A lot of them have been displaced, their homes. Many of them have lost their homes and the rest. But the reality is that there is no place like home. And so wherever it is, I don't think they can be better off than being in their home. But that is one of the things that I think the government and the international community also has to look at. How do we get all of these people to come back home? So that means that some of those things that are lacking, that will make it very difficult for them, make life very difficult for them. It becomes a duty for them to try and see what kind of infrastructure they can put in place. But beyond that, again, is the fact that you need to keep them safe. Because, they ran away as a result of the conflict. They need to be convinced, that when they get home, that their lives, will no longer be in danger. And so it's only this process that have been started up, that is already unfolding, that would have to be improved upon, to ensure that they can be adequately taken care of. And I think that that's why I was saying that it's critical that the IGAD countries, the international community, all those involved in this process must be, with all of the factions along all the way and make sure that they keep a close look, they monitor exactly what is going on, because it can unravel overnight. And so it's also important that you integrate or reintegrate some of these fighters either within, you know, the military infrastructure of the government. You know, make sure, because they say an idle mind, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. So if you don't get them engaged, if you don't get them involved in one economic activity or the other, then you're going to give them guns. They are not going to, you know, they are going to use those guns to commit all kinds of atrocities and all of that. So it's important that that is looked into. And I see the, you know, contributing countries, those countries contributing troops to this process, playing a much greater role in making sure that the warring factions, as much as possible, are kept at bay. But again, compared to the number of troops that are coming in from the African Union and the IGAD countries and so on, you find out that it's going to be a very difficult order. They are not exactly familiar with the terrain, and you have vast terrains that they are not all going to, you know, monitor and so on. So you all have all kinds of criminalities and other things going on. So all of these things are going to weigh heavily, you know, in terms of having the ability, you know, to ensure that 2 million, 3 million is a very large number.
Right.
You know, so it's going to task the resources of the government of the day. So what it means is that a lot more will be coming in from, you know, the international agencies, foreign aid and the rest, to help with the issue of resettlement. Yeah.
Now, finally, before I let you go, Garang, what more can you add that can be done in South Sudan to sustain the peace?
I think one of the issues that mediators seem not to do is the relationship between the two leaders. President Kuir and Riek Machar have made a political differences that have made them personal. So it's not even a political disagreement, it's really, really personal. So if this has to end, the two leaders actually have to believe that what is crucial here is not about them, it's about the people. So they can compromise, not because they like themselves, but because they have to look at the bigger picture about the people of South Sudan, about the country, about the future generation. So if they let a political disagreement becomes personal, then it compromises, you know, whatever South Sudan would achieve. So what the mediators would urge is for them to work towards making them understand that.
All right. Thank you very much, Kuir Garang, for your thoughts on Africa Today. And also let me thank my guest in the studio, Achike Chude. I'm sorry, I know you wanted to say something else.
Yeah, there must be statesmen.
Okay.
Sudan is bigger than them. I agree with him 100%.
All right. And that's a fine place to leave it. Thank you very much, Achike Chude, for your thoughts as well on Africa Today.